Panel, everything that government tells in today's debate will respond to them like in my positive manner because there are so much. But then just 3 responses to what opposition, opening government argues in today's debate. They say that government should decide what is morally right, and like what is morally wrong, and because they want a morally upright society. 3 responses. Firstly, the application of even this morality in itself is something that is very, very, very adaptive or very, very relative in itself, right? For example, trustworthiness, as they use as an example, is something that maybe in a Christian home, trustworthiness is supposed to mean that the woman is supposed to be subservient, right? But in some other kind of demographics, trustworthiness doesn't exactly mean that the woman has to be subservient entirely to her husband. So even the morality you argue is something that still remains very relative. So you cannot also determine to what extent people define it. Secondly, you don't create a law-abiding citizenry because not everyone can purchase, right? When we talk about rich people being able to purchase, when you commodify these things and you say these ones are the most important traits that people should have, poor people cannot equally buy this, right? So poor people cannot have it. So if your goal is to have a morally upright society, poor people can never be upright or can never be morally upright because they cannot buy these traits themselves. Thirdly, and most important, even if they can buy, because there's still an option to opt out, right? Because people can still say, we don't want to buy. I want to be selfish, I want to be a drunkard, I want to be a womanizer. I can still choose not to be morally upright as you want to. All their goals and aspirations fall flat, right? So, like, let's get straight to our substances that take care of what Hawa brings into our speech. We ask the direct POI, if traits can be developed, right, why do you have to even commodify these things in the first place? And I'm going to be expanding that POI when I talk about like the argument of limiting choices as opposed to status quo. So first of all, let's talk about like exactly what the nature of traits in themselves are supposed to be. My panel, recognize that traits are of a relative nature and differ from person to person and from society to society, right? What I consider to be desirable traits is not what this young man might consider to us as well to be a desirable trait, right? So we think that it is intrinsically wrong for you to like make government the sole guardian of morality by choosing what exactly should be desirable for the entire populace or for the entire citizenry. That in itself is wrong. For example, in some societies like Christian backgrounds, promiscuity is seen as a bad thing, right? I'm supposed to be seen as a bad person if I have a thing for more than one woman. But in some other societies, promiscuity is admired. People hail promiscuity. In societies where I can aspire to marry more than one wife, right? So being able to have a thing for more than one woman is something that is desirable in another society. So one thing that you call immoral, promiscuity, is also seen as a trait of a great man or a noble person in another society. And we think for that reason, we should allow society to continue to remain diverse, right? Also, even morality in itself is hugely relative, right? Like for example, like I already showed you, like in most places, right? The definition of what trustworthiness or what loyalty is supposed to be has a difference, like from other societies. Secondly, panel, when you create a narrative of preferred traits, you create stereotypes that are harmful, right? How are they harmful? Because people will now aspire to these supposedly desirable traits. There's going to be an extinction of these other traits that you consider to not be desirable, right? And why do we think that this is bad? When you create a homogeneous society, we think you take away the ability of society to critique ideas, right? And to be able to like develop. Heterogeneity of society is the bedrock of society's dynamism. The reason why society progresses, right, is because society considers something bad yesterday and like decides to move on from it and consider this to be important today. Also, heterogeneity, like plurality of ideas, creates an environment that is necessary for the development of society, right? Because if society were to be as dormant as they want it to be, if society were to be just static, and we have only one type of trait or a few type of traits that are considered to be desirable, what it means is that there is no point for society to even aspire to want to change or to want to grow. We think this is hugely a misnomer. Also, heterogeneity allows people to adapt to different societies, right? Because like I already showed you that traits are relative from society to society. So when I want to move from a new society to another society, I'm supposed to be able to adapt. I'm supposed to be able to develop those traits myself and be able to fit into the new society that I want to find into. But when you create a stereotype that things are supposed to be some certain way, what you do is that you make it impossible for me to adapt to new societies or to aspire to new things if I choose to engage in it.
To the various societies, their definition of morality will blend the traits they choose to harvest from these individuals, engage.
So what you're saying is that in Nigeria we should sell trustworthiness, for example, and in America we shouldn't sell trustworthiness. We still don't see how that's a progressive idea, right? If you want a trustworthy society, you should want a holistically moral upright society. You shouldn't want a society that is morally upright in Abia State and morally non-upright in Ebonyi State. We think that's ultimately wrong in itself. Also, heterogeneity breeds competition that is necessary for human beings to aspire to new frontiers. The reason why there's a competition between you and I is because we have different traits, right? Because I myself, for example, I'm a selfish person and I want to acquire more wealth to myself. That's why there's competition. That's why we have developmental strides. If people do not want to be famous, if people do not want to be greedy enough about acquiring wealth, we won't even have developmental strides in the first place, right? And we think this is something that's wrong. So because they consider selfishness and greed, which are inherent traits of human beings, to be bad, we think that even the good sides of selfishness and greed is something that we're going to be losing out of if we decide to commodify or if we decide to identify other traits as being better. Thirdly, let's talk about the theory of evolution, right? Like in times past, in like the theory of in the Stone Ages, for example, people will aspire to traits that make them more aggressive, right? Traits that can help them survive in the forest, that can help them catch animals with their hands, etc. But in today's world, where political excellence is the thing of the day, people aspire to traits that help them fit into governance, for example. So if you decide to sell these traits that make me able to become a president today, and tomorrow the world no longer recognizes political excellence as a thing, right? That means I can no longer fit into that world of tomorrow. We think this is hugely bad, higher set. Also, let's talk about like this capitalistic expectation that they decide to run away from today's debate. Rich people will and can always decide to buy off these traits, right? Thereby making it as non-accessible to poor people. This is what opening tells you. But more importantly, rich people have the wherewithal to even decide which traits, the traits that they possess, which they can be able to say that these ones are the ones that should be desirable, right? Rich people have the capacity to lobby society, to believe that their own traits are because this is like a stock market. If I am a trustworthy person, I decide that trustworthiness should be the traits in the stock market today. So because I want to make money from it, I make society to believe with me that the trait I have as a rich man is the trait that society should consider to be desirable. But the fact that rich people have the tendency to exploit this and sabotage it is something that we find hugely wrong in conclusion, people have the right to aspire to different kinds of traits. I have the right to aspire to be a womanizer, and that's a bad trait according to government, right? But then because that I have that inherent choice in me, these guys take it away from me, right? Because the thing is that as they concede, when you put these things or when you commodify them, when you put them in the market, you incentivize the entire world to want to go towards them. So if people go towards the traits that I don't have, you put me in the minority and I'm open to oppression by those that are in the majority of traits. We think this is hugely bad. If you stand for like society's progressiveness, you should stand for closing opposition, probably opposition.